Welcome, Kelly Cougars. I am so excited to see you. I have missed our story time together so much. Welcome to your new online library classroom. Today we're going to get started with a read aloud, something I call a big read, where everyone in the same school building hears the exact same story. For those of you that were with us in the first 2 weeks of school this year, you may remember the first big read we did together, The Dot by Peter H. Reynolds. Everybody heard the story, The Dot, and then afterwards made their own dot to share with everyone else. We are going to hear a story today in which we will all be asked to make something and share if we can. The story we will be hearing is titled The Big Orange Splot by Daniel Pinkwater. Here is our front cover, the title, and on the back, a short commercial about the book. When Mr. Plumbean painted his house, the neighbors couldn't believe their eyes. "Plumbean has gone too far," they said. "He's popped his cork, flipped his wig, blown his stack, and dropped his stopper." I don't know about you, but I'm excited to find out what will happen to Mr. Plumbean. Let's get started. There's our title page, The Big Orange Splot. I will read the page and then show you the picture. Mr. Plumbean lived on a street where all the houses were the same. He liked it that way. So did everybody else on Mr. Plumbean's street. "This is a neat street," they would say. Then, one day, a seagull flew over Mr. Plumbean's house. He was carrying a can of bright orange paint. No one knows why. And he dropped the can. No one knows why. Right over Mr. Plumbean's house. It made a big orange splot on Mr. Plumbean's house. "Oh, too bad," everybody said. "Mr. Plumbean will have to paint his house again." "I suppose I will," said Mr. Plumbean. But he didn't paint his house right away. He looked at the big orange splot for a long time. Then he went about his business. The neighbors got tired of seeing that big orange splot. Someone said, "Mr. Plumbean, we wish you'd get around to painting your house." "Okay," said Mr. Plumbean. This is a question for you, folks. Should neighbors be able to tell each other how to paint their house? Why or why not? Talk to someone in your household. He got some blue paint and some white paint, and that night he got busy. He painted at night because it was cooler. When the paint was gone, the roof was blue, the walls were white, and the big orange splot was still there. Then he got some more paint. He got red paint, yellow paint, green paint, and purple paint. In the morning, the other people on the street came out of their houses. Their houses were all the same, but Mr. Plumbean's house was like a rainbow. It was like a jungle. It was like an explosion. There was the big orange splot, and there were little orange spots. There were stripes, There were pictures of elephants and lions and pretty girls and steam shovels. The people said, "Plumbean has popped his cork, flipped his wig, blown his stack, and dropped his stopper." They went away muttering. That day, Mr. Plumbean bought carpenter's tools. That night, he built a tower on top of his roof, and he painted a clock on the tower. The next day, people said, "Plumbean has gushed his mush, lost his marbles, and slipped his hawser." They decided they would pretend not to notice. Do you know what the word hawser means? Have you ever pretended to not notice something that you thought was strange? That very night, Mr. Plumbean got a truck full of green things. He planted palm trees, baobabs, thorn bushes, onions, and frangipani. In the morning, he bought a hammock and an alligator. Can you find the alligator in this room? When the other people came out of their houses, they saw Mr. Plumbean swinging in a hammock between two palm trees. They saw an alligator lying in the grass. Mr. Plumbean was drinking lemonade. "Plumbean has gone too far. This used to be a neat street." "Plumbean, what have you done to your house?" the people shouted. "My house is me and I am it. My house is where I like to be, and it looks like all my dreams," said Mr. Plumbean. The people went away. They asked the man who lived next door to Mr. Plumbean to go and have a talk with him. "Tell him that we all liked it here before he changed his house. Tell him that his house has to be the same as our house so we can have a neat street." The man went to see Mr. Plumbean that evening. They sat under the palm trees drinking lemonade and talking all night long. Early the next morning, the man went out to get the lumber and rope and nails and paint. When the people came out of their houses, they saw a red and yellow ship next door to the house of Mr. Plumbean. "What have you done to your house?" they shouted at the man. "My house is me and I am it. My house is where I like to be and it looks like all my dreams," said the man, who had always loved ships. "He's just like Mr. Plumbean," the people said. "He's got bees in his bonnet, bats in his belfry, and knots in his noodle." Then, one by one, they went to see Mr. Plumbean. Late at night, they would sit under the palm trees and drink lemonade and talk about their dreams. And whenever anybody visited Mr. Plumbean's house, the very next day that person would set about changing his own house to fit his dreams. Whenever a stranger came to the street of Mr. Plumbean and his neighbors, the stranger would say, "This is not a neat street." Then all the people would say, "Our street is us and we are it." Our street is where we like to be, and it looks like all our dreams. The end. Now, students in kindergarten, first grade, second grade, third grade, fourth grade, and fifth grade, with any supplies you have, create a picture of a house that looks like your dreams. Kindergarten, first grade, second grade, if you are able, take a picture of that image and upload it to your Seesaw journal. Third grade, fourth grade, fifth grade, please add a few words telling us about your image, and you may add it to your Google Classroom, either in your library class Google Classroom or to share with your homeroom teacher. I look forward to seeing all of your houses that you've created to look just like your dreams, and I can't wait to share some of your fellow students' artwork with you. Until next time.